Okay, we're now recording.
Oops. Okay, so thank you again for joining me and for being persistent. We had a little glitch, but that's okay. All of this is part of the process. You're here for the professional development through micro credentialing presentation. It's only a half-hour presentation, so if you wanted to bounce off and go to the longer one afterward, or if you want to leave early, that's fine. I'm very informal in my presentations, just so you know. So if you just wanted to ask a question or intervene anywhere along the way, I don't find it offensive. It's one of those cross-cultural things where it's like, that's how we do it in my house, so it's okay. And you're all very respectful, I'm sure, so it wouldn't be a problem. Just to start, this is essentially what I wanted to talk to you about. It's about micro-credentials, and I won't read this to you, but it's essentially the idea of completing competencies to develop smaller skill sets, but many of them. So in terms of professional development, it's kind of like what national boards do, where you're taking a critical and reflective approach to your own learning, and it's very individualized. And what you're doing is developing small skills so they add up to a bigger picture. And so it ends up being a lot of personal as well as professional development. I think this is, I hope, the new wave of professional development. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about why I believe that this is a pretty much a really good way to go as our teaching profession is changing because of all of the events that have been happening with the pandemic and how the teaching profession is probably going to suffer for many years from it. But I'm sure you all get this face when people ask you about your professional development plan. And I think pre-D has become like this ugly buzzword, but it doesn't have to be that. So that's why we're here. So hello, Andrea Mercado. I am an ELL teacher at McMahon Elementary. I currently serve the 5th and 6th graders there here in Lewiston, Maine. Before that, I taught in a couple different states. I taught 8 years in the Fort Lauderdale area, where I taught mostly Haitian refugee students in a small community school, way before ELL was even a label. I mean, we had the beginnings of it, but it was not as big as a field as it is now. After that, I went to New York City, where I taught for 6 years. I taught for 3 years in an inner city school that had dozens of different cultures. I taught first grade, so I really learned how to work with literacy in the early years with multilingual students. And then I taught at a transitional bilingual middle school, Spanish speaking. And then I came up to University of Maine, where I worked as an independent consultant with many small districts that had low incidences of English learners. So that was a very contrasting experience for me, but it taught me a lot about rural schools and how schooling with small incidences of students looks, and a lot of the challenges that the schools face. And then I came here to Lewiston, which is kind of in the middle, where, as many of you know, we have a good population of English learners, but many of them are of African descent. And so they have their own unique needs and challenges. But most of all, I'm the child of Colombian immigrants who came here in the 70s, so I was an English learner. And so I feel I have a particular unique perspective, whereas I understand what it's like to go through that and a lot of the context that comes from having parents who are immigrants and trying to adjust to a new social setting. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off exploring this idea of professional development in terms of how adults learn best. So when you train to be a teacher, you go to university, you get all this college coursework, and they're preparing you for best pedagogical practices, and hopefully you're becoming a content area specialist. But in essence, how do adults learn best? And so I want to explore that idea a little bit. And since there's not that many of us, I might just make this a little more interactive. What I want to do is introduce you to the concept of andragogy. And this is kind of like the opposite of pedagogy, but it's aimed for adults. There, in the world of education, adult education, if any of you have taught in the adult education field, there is a particular set of principles that go around how to best teach adults. And if you've ever taught ELL to adults, then this will be something pretty familiar to you. But I thought it was very interesting that maybe a lot of us don't know about this. And when school districts try to roll out professional development, do they really understand these principles, and are they being applied in the way that they're offering information and hoping that teachers gain new skills and insights? So I just want to show you a real quick little video that talks about these principles.
Andrea, if they're talking, we're not hearing it. You have to specifically tell it to share the sound. So if you want to start over on the video, maybe.
Oh, shoot.
And when you hit that share screen part, there's an option there where you can tell it to share the sound as well.
I should know how to do this. Okay.
Just an extra step that we often forget.
Malcolm Knowles first proposed Androgogy. It had 4 principles about the way adults learn. However, over time and with further research, 2 additional andragogical principles were added. It's important to note that these are generalizations and don't necessarily apply to individual people. The learners need to know. The core principle is that adults need to know why before they engage in learning. It is believed to be more effective if adult learners have shared control of the learning process. There are 3 dimensions to this need to know. First, how the learning will be conducted. Second, what learning will occur. And third, why the learning is important. Self-directed learning. Adults can and do engage in self-directed learning. Adults assume ownership of their own learning. This can mean choosing a formal class or independent study. It does not mean that all adults like to self-teach. Rather, the idea here is that adults make the choice of how they approach the need to learn something new. Prior experience of the learner. Adults bring a plethora of unique experiences to the classroom. Adults' prior experience impacts learning because their previous knowledge is built upon. However, adults' prior experience can also cause biases that can create a natural tendency to resist new learning. Readiness to learn. Adults generally become ready to learn when something in their life causes them to need to learn something. For example, a new job or career change. Further, adults may have many life impediments to learning, such as family and career, which can negatively affect an adult's readiness to learn. Orientation to learning and problem solving. Adults generally prefer a problem-solving orientation to learning rather than a subject orientation to learning. Further, adults learn best when the skill or knowledge is placed into a real-world context. Motivation to learn. Adults tend to be more motivated to learn by things that help them solve real-world problems or help to improve their lives in some way. They tend to be more intrinsically motivated, wanting to be successful learners and wanting to enjoy the learning process.
Okay, so
when Malcolm Knowles first proposed...
So when we think about professional development, these principles sometimes, hopefully often, have been part of your experiences, but they are not always. So can you share with me what are some forms of professional development for ELs in particular that you've participated in? And you can type your answers in the chat or you can just speak them up. Sit and get conferences. There's none at your school. Classes, coursework, webinars. Yeah, webinars have become very popular. They're a bit more accessible. Sit and get conferences. So when you go to conferences, how many of you have actually been able to go like to national conferences or even regional conferences? Oh, PSYOP training, good. Okay. So NNET, yes. Oh, if you haven't been to NNET Seoul, I'm gonna pitch it. You should go. I'll send everybody an invite. Yeah. And virtually, yeah. So, oh, good. So if you've never been to a national conference, they're usually very large, but they offer a lot of variety. And one of the things that a lot of us like to do is engage with our colleagues, right? And so in the context of learning, can you all see my screen?
No.
That's what I thought. Okay, 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, so when we think about our professional development, like a lot of you have mentioned, you've gone to maybe some conferences, you might have PD at school, webinars, and unfortunately, especially when it comes to your professional development for English learners, unless your district has made it a priority or unless you're the ELO teacher, a lot of other staff and teachers, a lot of the people who work with our students who are English learners have not gotten much professional development, if any at all. And if they have, it's probably because they've sought it out themselves, or maybe the district has tried to move in that direction, but it's often not the case, especially here in the state of Maine, which is unfortunate. And so one of the reasons I wanted to offer this presentation is because there are ways that we can improve that, and there are ways that we can make it easier for districts to do that, because I know oftentimes it's attached to money, so it's often not a priority on a lot of districts' lists. So in terms of professional learning, what I want us to also remember is that we often function in a continuum or a spectrum of understanding with anything, right? And so when it comes to working with particular subpopulations, whether it be English learners or special education or any other subpopulation of students that need a specific type of assistance that needs additional training, then these continuums of professional learning are a really good baseline for us to understand where we should go with our professional development. How many of you would agree that one of the reasons we don't like those sit in where we have to sit for professional development is the fact that it's not differentiated, right? A lot of us are asked to differentiate for our students, but my complaint is always, well, why isn't professional development differentiated? I mean, that's a part of development and learning, is that we're not all at the same stage. You have brand new teachers, you have quote unquote veteran teachers, and then you have a lot of teachers in between. And depending on how engaged you are in your own professional learning, you may have sought out a lot of other opportunities. So we are also on a spectrum of learning, and very rarely is our professional development differentiated. And so here are some of, here's a little framework for how we can look at that continuum. wherein like the first stage would be developing awareness. So a good example of this is when a lot of the ideas of like social emotional learning started to really become a priority for districts, or the ACEs training. So a lot of this was new to many teachers. And so we were all in like stage one of developing awareness. So if you'd already been engaged in that world a little bit, like if you did any social work, or if you were in special education, or you're a school psychologist, maybe you were in the building knowledge or translating practice. So in building knowledge, you know a little bit about it, you're exploring it more, you're gaining more resources, and you kind of are ready to take the ideas and do something with them. They're not brand new. And then you move into translating into practice, which is exactly what it says, is like you've gotten all this information and now you're like, all right, so how am I really going to use it? And it's not overnight, because you need time to absorb the information and really plan it out and see how it's going to apply to your particular setting. Once you have a chance to do that, that's where we do a lot of informal assessment and informal or formal data collection, because that's how we offer our own feedback and see if something is working. It's kind of like the scientific process. And then hopefully you're going into the reflection stage, where you're asking yourself or your teams or whoever you're working with, how well is this working? Is this something that we can continue to do? Do we need to modify it, and how so? And then once you've gotten past that reflection stage and you've been able to tweak it a little bit, then you get to the building capacity stage, whereas now you can go and coach other people on this process. You can develop some artifacts. Maybe you have exemplars for people to look to when they're coming in through the process. So it's this iterative cycle of learning, and there's always a different starting point for everyone. So this is kind of like the template that we use when we approach the idea of micro-credentialing, where it's like we're all at different stages of learning, but as a team and as a group, we can help each other to get to the next stage. Does somebody have a comment? Okay. All right. So moving up towards the idea of how we can use micro-credentials as opposed to necessarily having to take a course. PLCs are pretty good at this, and maybe we can merge both worlds. But I think with PLCs, there are just maybe some missing components, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the reason I like this notion that I'm going to introduce to you about micro-credentialing is that here, according to these strategies for effective professional development, going through the process of the micro-credentials really hits upon each of these. So for professional learning to be most effective, we just talked about the ideas around how adults learn best. And the main takeaway is for adults to have a problem-solving approach and an opportunity to solve real-life problems that they're being affected by in the professional workplace. And the opportunity to apply them, to apply those problem-solving approaches. And so by having a content focus, you can really develop different ways to approach problems. Another strategy would be to incorporate active learning. So once again, when you're taking new concepts and you're applying them, that's active learning, just like we want to do for our students, right? Supports collaboration. So collaboration, we always talk about how collaboration is key. And I know it's an opportunity as well as a challenge for teachers who work with English learners to work with like the mainstream teachers and have time to collaborate if both parties are willing to collaborate. But definitely in terms of professional learning, this collaboration piece is one of the important ones, because as we mentioned, since we're all at different stages, we all have something to contribute. The use of effective models of practice. And so when there's a model that has been research-based and well thought out and tried and true, then why shouldn't we go through that, right? As we just mentioned, provides coaching and expert support. So the micro-credentialing that I'm gonna show you that we worked on not only gives you content and opportunities to collaborate and try things out, but it's also giving you somebody that's there to say, okay, try this, or maybe you can try it this way, or somebody to offer you feedback that has an expertise in that area. So it's not just like a PLC where you're all getting together and maybe you're doing a book study, but this is all new to all of you. No, in this model, somebody actually has some level of expertise in whatever it is that you're trying to develop your skills in, so that you have like a mentor or a coach. And just like number 6, they offer you feedback and offer you opportunities for reflection on multiple levels. And I think that's a key is in all the professional development that I've ever sought out, if I've had the time to go back and do all these things, but actually sit and reflect on my practice, that's where it becomes very internalized. And so that's when habits change, because now your mindset is changing because it's been a reflective practice. And I think that's key. And that's where it becomes sustained in duration, because you're not rushed. So sometimes some of the pitfalls that I believe come from like taking coursework is like you just talk about a particular topic very intensely for a couple of months and then just drops off. Unless you have somebody else where you're going to sustain that with, it's not durable and it's not prolonged. But in terms of this process, when you're working with a team and it's a long-term goal, then you get more opportunities to really sink your teeth in and, like I said, kind of change your habits in terms of what you do in your practice. Okay, so what is micro-credentialing? So can you all let me know how many of you have ever heard of micro-credentialing? Just I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I can't see. Okay, there you all are. Okay. You have heard of it. Good. So I've talked to a lot of my teachers and they're like, what's that? Like, what do you eat that with? What are micro-credentials? And I often share with them that education is many times a little late in the game when it comes to adopting practices from like other fields. So often we take practices from the business world, from the medical field, and so on. And this whole notion of micro-credentialing did emerge from like the technology field. And I picked up a little quote. I also included the source for this in my resources. So if you want to read, it's a white paper by the American Institute of Research. That's kind of interesting. But they say that micro-credentials have their roots in digital badging. So I don't know if you've heard of digital badges. If you're on LinkedIn, they have these like little mini badges, courses. So it's just ways to develop competencies. So the digital badge movement gained traction as a way to support adult learning for the workforce. Open badges specified technical standards for digital badges and provided a place where individuals could collect badges that meet these technical standards. And
Andrea,
I think,
sorry to interrupt you, but are you sharing this right now?
yeah.
It's not showing.
Oh boy, I should be better at this. Okay. Now? Can everybody see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see if this video is going to play properly.
Can you make it smaller so we can read
After years in
Pardon me?
You make it a little, never mind. I'm sorry.
No, I don't know what you can see because I can't see you.
Yeah,
So-
it's okay. I figured it out.
Okay, was it something on your end?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank
thank-
you.
No, no worries. Like I said, just talk to me because I'm looking at the presentation, but I can't all see you all right now. So anything, just interject.
in the works, a program created through research conducted by UCLA Center X has resulted in the ESOL Leadership Academy.
The work that we're doing doesn't really work with how you teach a child English. It's more about how you teach a child who doesn't speak English or who's learning English, how you teach them everything else, social studies, English, math, all the other subjects. So there's really nothing else out there for regular classroom teachers. They're all designed to prepare the ESL specialist.
The more we learn and the better we become at our profession, and helping English learners, then really the better for everybody.
The Excel Leadership Academy's micro-credential program uses a competency-based approach where teachers learn while doing and demonstrating their skill.
It's building capacity. It's allowing teachers to take their skills, which are considerable, and their love of their students, and add to that toolbox, if you will, some very specific tools that allow for students that speak a different language at home to make that switch to adapt to English and master English.
Teachers interface with the online system. They do an analysis of their student needs. They do a plan for their project. They collect evidence of whatever it is they're doing. Then they reflect on what they learned and what they still need to do.
Acquired skills are formally recognized by micro-credentials. Staff, coaches, and partners at the Excel Leadership Academy prepare all teachers to work with English learners. This approach melds current knowledge of effective adult learning and effective instruction for ELs geared toward mainstream teachers. By using a micro-credential approach in which teachers progress at their own rate and demonstrate their mastery of best practices, Excel Leadership Academy makes professional learning about ELs more accessible to more teachers.
The importance of personalizing it, making it relevant.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. I just noticed that it's 1:50, and so if you want me to finish up, I can, but if you just want me to share the rest of the presentation is just going through what we do in the Excel Academy. So it's up to you if you want me to continue. I don't know if you want to go to another session. I know some people had to leave. Okay, so I'll just keep going. Oh, UMF has micro-credentials, great. Yeah, I stopped sharing. I'm sorry, Heather. I don't know why I haven't been able to figure out how to do both. And it's funny because I do it all the time with my students, right? But I'll just keep going for about another 5 minutes or so. And if you have any questions, of course, just go ahead and pop in and ask. Okay, so, oh, come on. All right, so what I'll give you a little bit of context. I found out about this Excel Leadership Academy at the ESOL Conference, actually, and they were looking for schools to collaborate with. They're based in UCLA, and they have written a grant that allows them to develop these networks at schools and support the teachers through that micro-credentialing platform that they showed in the video. And what they essentially do is they just break down like particular skills, and I'll show you a couple of examples for teachers to work on. And like I said, if you know anything about like national boards, it's a lot like that, where they say we're going to work on developing second language acquisition, which is what I'm doing with my teachers. And they will take you through these steps where they're going to ask you some context. They have you write up a real quick summary of your classroom, and then they'll ask you to look at some content and some principles around second language acquisition. And then they'll say, okay, now let's take this information and apply it to your classroom, identify some students, write up a document of what strategies you want to try out. And so it's taking you through all of these stages where you're actually going to put this into practice. And then you offer some artifacts of what your students have done. You do a little video of yourself, and then you write up a reflection of what you've learned through the process. And then you upload all of that into a platform, kind of like a Blackboard, or if you've taken courses before where you do interacting online, you upload all of that, somebody assesses it, and then if you've met all the requirements, then you earn a micro-credential for that particular skill. And so the Excel Leadership Academy essentially just wants to offer accessible learning for teaching English learners to whoever wants to do that. As you can see here in the third bullet, it says we've created 12 discrete micro-credentials organized into 2 tiers. The first are recommended for all teachers, which is excellent because it can be the art teacher, it can be Obviously, mainstream teachers, they can be the social worker. They're always wanting to include whoever wants to do this. Anybody can do it. And then there are the second tier, which would be for, if you're, for example, the ELL teacher, you would probably engage in this part, which is what I'm doing. It's more of the ESL and TESOL specialist, where you're going to become like the coach for following groups and teams. So here are the different tiers that I was just talking about. And so as you can see, the beginning tiers is like for people who don't know a whole lot about the world of ELS. Second language acquisition, instructional strategies, equitable assessment, school culture and family engagement, supporting student voice and professionalism. And it's pretty well rounded. And I will say that they're continuously like adding new micro credentials. They're developing one now for working with students with disabilities. They're doing one for people who coach or who offer professional development to other teachers. And so they're continuing to expand this so that it becomes a more well-rounded experience. This is just some information that I kind of went over, but the things that they offer are, they will offer a mentor coach from another school. Right now, my mentor coach is in Rhode Island. And so she's been through it with her school and her team, and she coaches me, and I'm the coordinator for my school. So I'm the one that's the facilitator and kind of like the coach for my teachers. And so it's like this multi-tiered approach, but you always have support. But the really cool thing is, since I mentioned that they're federally granted, they have a federal grant, they have money. And so they offer us money for paying us per hour when we work after school. We get stipends for our meetings. If we need any texts or supplies, they will help us with that. Also, if we want to go to professional development like conferences or workshops, they will also help sponsor that as well. So money always helps, right? It's a great motivator. Oh, but one of the other things that they do is this design studios. And so they're like kind of like webinars, but they're like interactive webinars where they're offering you new ways to teach particular content. Like right now they're doing one with math, and they're showing you how to scaffold math assessments in different ways so that the students can access them more easily. So it's a multi-tiered approach to support teachers who want to help develop their practice. And as I said here, this is pretty much what you would do as a participant. You engage in meetings. We meet bi-weekly. We develop our own professional learning plan. And what I love about it is very individualized. Like my teachers, they don't have to finish at the same time. A couple of them have told me they want to put it on hold for a couple of months, so we're going to do that. One of them wants to finish next week. So it's however you want to do it, it's for you. And that's what I tell my teachers. I'm like, this is your own personal professional development. It's not on my timeline. You learn at your own pace. You implement things at your own pace. If you want to reframe it, you do whatever you want with it. And that's what makes it very unique, because it's not a one size fits all. And that's what I really like about it. This is more about the Excel teams, but since we're a little short in time, you can read this later. But I think one of the benefits that I wanted to share was that, as I mentioned, it is a network. So when I go to my team leader meetings or coordinator meetings, I'm talking with people from California, from Texas, from New York, from Rhode Island, from Massachusetts, from Connecticut. And I love that, because it's kind of like when you go to a big conference, because everybody's sharing out what they're doing, and you get all of these ideas, and you get to have other people to collaborate with, because sometimes it's very isolating for us, right? But I think being part of a network, you feel just so much more supported and like so much more heard. People can really understand the situation you're in, and it's very encouraging and very motivating. So I'll end it there. And let's see. Can teachers do this without participating in a school-based team? I'm pretty sure you can, but it's really hard because you don't have anybody to collaborate with. So if you're interested, Thomas, you can email me, and maybe we can work on how I can pull you into my teams, because since we can do so many things virtually now, that's definitely a possibility.
Thank you.
Sure. Does anyone else have any questions? It's free, Heather. You know what? The only thing you would have to pay for is and I'm not sure if they cover the cost of it, but if you wanted your micro credentials to become graduate credits that you could use like towards certification, I think you may have to pay for that through UCLA. So you would get a graduate credit through UCLA, but I'd have to find out if you'd pay for it out of pocket or if the network would also help pay for that. But it's completely free. They actually want to pay you. So that's helpful.
Andrea, thank you for your patience with a rough start, and thank you for hanging in here at the end. You know, this has been really helpful and very informative. Great job. Thanks to everyone who's here. But I'm sorry, I'm going to have to shut it down so we can start.
I know we're over time. Thank you all for coming. And yes, my presentation will be available. Please feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to correspond with you.